Ah, yes, back when Game Freak was willing to try actual ideas and build from one generation to the next. And now I'm getting flashbacks to the rather good movie involving the Unknown. That was some proper supernatural mindfuckery in that one, and I'm outright shocked the Unknown were essentially forgotten after Generation 2 and that astounding movie. Kind of a shame that the legendary Dogs of Johto just don't have the same impact as the Unknown or the legendary Birds of Kanto. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we have to deal with a lot of minor and major gods as legendaries from Generation 3 onwards. At the very least, Crystal seems to be really pushing hard for Suicune here, the legendary water dog here. Funny, since Gold had the bird Ho-Ho and Silver had Lugia. Why didn't they add a third major bird to keep things fair? Were they just getting tired of birds at that point or something? Funny how I just can't find it in me to get tired of that song in the background no matter how many times I hear it. I don't remember if they kept it as the background theme for Pokemon in later generations. They certainly should have. It's damn catchy at the very least. And since it stayed on from Generation 1 to 2, it could easily have become the theme for the entire Pokemon franchise, much like Metroid has some very distinct themes that they use over and over again. But that's enough sitting around and enjoying the starting menu theme and image. Let's get things rolling. This is the first game that ever gave us a choice in gender, and frankly, I like the look of the girl more than the boy in this game. It's a shame that they went with a completely different design for the girl in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Anyway, Generation 2 was the introduction of the in-game clock for the franchise, and with the exception of Generation 3, it was very much important for all the future games. I always found it a bit of a pain in the ass though, since it kinda makes it feel to me like I need to schedule parts of my week for something that happens in the game world. But you can potentially ignore it and just get things done without paying attention to when you're playing. Still, I can't really get around the fact that one of the reasons I dropped the Pokemon series for a long time was because of the combination of that bloody clock system and the lackluster storytelling. Sure, the storytelling in things like Final Fantasy, Suikoden, and Shin Megami Tensei kept me from coming back to Pokemon's more basic stuff, but the clock was one of my biggest reasons for abandoning ship back then. Guess I'm a little weird like that, since it's not really that big of a thing. Again, really like the Crystal Games female sprite. She really comes across as a rough and tumble tomboy. So of course, we're gonna call her Triss, a gender-neutral name to go with the fact that she only exists in Pokemon Crystal. Indeed we will, Professor. Is there a reason Oak had to see us at the start instead of Elm, the person who's actually the professor of this region? Anyway, doesn't look like we've got a potion laying in our computer like back in the first generation. There's also more colors allowed on the screen instead of just 2 at a time like in the previous one. It's not all that much of a change, but still, it's pretty noticeable. Sorry, I'm unlikely to do all that much with the radio in this or the remake, especially since we can't actually hear the voices of the people talking in the background. It was an interesting idea to help try to make the world feel more alive, though, so credit there. Yeah, Johto isn't all that different in terms of layout from Kanto, understandable since the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color aren't especially major leaps in terms of processing power. Still, they shoved as much as they could into the second generation cartridges, just stuffed them so full of all their ideas that there was no room to add anything else. I really wish that Game Freak still had that level of dedication to making Pokemon as great as they could on the hardware they were given to work with. Hey, patience there, Chris. I'd like to learn more about the world and how it's changed since last time instead of rushing towards the next journey. Hence the 4 clips before we got this started in the first place. Lady, you'd be hard-pressed to find people who don't love Pokemon, especially when you're living in a world full of them. I can certainly guess what he wants us to do is going to involve us gaining our starter. Part of me wants to ask what our Pokegear was doing getting repairs before we've even become a bloody trainer. And if it got damaged by something rather mundane, how is it going to function properly for our entire journey as we pick up numerous supernatural critters that can cause varying amounts of collateral damage, sometimes unintentionally? Ugh. You aren't making it clear if yes means when we change it we're gonna go backwards or forwards an hour. Not that I bothered to change the clock to match the actual time of day after that happened while recording over an obscene period of time. It's just one of those things that helped throw me off in the second generation. I'm pretty sure that by the 4th generation the games set their own clocks to match the time on the machine you're playing on. No need for the player to set those sort of things up anymore. Right, of course the professor isn't home. You don't need to worry if he's okay. He's working less than a minute's walk from where you are right now. Granted, New Barktown is probably a lot larger than just the 4 buildings we get to see in the Game Boy Color, but it's still a bit chuckle-worthy. And look at that. The kid wants to be just like his father. Wait, was that Elm's son and not a daughter? It's not like we get a lot of detail to work with after all. That person was blue, but then Chris is blue too, and she's a girl. I'm sure he is, though I'm more baffled that they decided to give Pikachu a baby form in this game. The little bastard is already popular enough to be the franchise mascot and stay there for several decades. Why even have an even cuter form that is purposely less capable in battle? I bet the only thing I can think of for why is that they wanted to help flesh the world out more in this game compared to the previous generation. Great. Not even through the first clip of playing through Crystal, and I'm already talking to the same people a few times. Well, that's probably not going to lengthen the journey by all that much. It's still a little bit funny to me. Not nearly as famous as Oaks, sir. Okay, bit hilarious that he just kicked us several feet away, but to be fair, we probably did come across as creepy just sneaking up behind him while he was staring into the window. And as someone with some nefarious intentions of his own, he'd probably be a bit more paranoid about a random person getting into his personal space. Well, I don't see what a random girl from across the street can do to help, but hey, it's as good an excuse as any for us to get our first Pokemon. If he wants research help, though, I can recommend a good photographer. I'm sure you will, sir. I'm just thinking that in later generations, the franchise goes into a holding pattern where we don't actually learn much of anything from game to game. And it's incredibly unfair of me to bitch about Pokemon in the pair of Switch game generations when I'm only just getting started with the second generation all the way back in the Game Boy Color days. Research that we're never going to get all that many details about. And here we are, the first choice of the game, our starter for the region. I've got to say, of the fire starters in all the generations, I think Cyndaquil is my favorite of the bunch. Yes, even more than Torchic in Generation 3. There's just something about that little file rat as it goes from first to second to third stage that looks more awesome to me than the at this point overdone Charmander to Charizard line or the admittedly pretty fun Torchic to Blaziken line. Well, I'm in a bit of an Orc Raider mood for some reason, so let's give our little fire rat an Orcish name. Welcome to the team, Gramash. We're going to absolutely conquer Johto together. I just need to think of some damn fine teammates to give you as we roll from gym to gym. Not that we have any Pokeballs to start gathering teammates with just yet. The second generation was also kind of an interesting idea, but considering in the second generation there were too many people that could be called, so you'd have to pick and choose who is worth putting on the phone, I'm probably not going to use it much if at all here. Whereas in Soul Silver, we're going to have enough space for absolutely everyone we run into in the game to be on our call list. So Chris here is going to come across as a bit of a wandering recluse who's more obsessed with fighting than any other human activity, while the Soul Silver playthrough, the character is probably going to come across as more sociable, despite the fact that neither let the protagonist really do much interacting with people, really. I was kind of hoping his aide would give us Pokeballs to start things off instead of a potion, but hey, take what you can get, especially when it's free. But then they're probably scrambling to get absolutely everything done around here. They've probably got more on their minds than giving some more supplies to the local intern, who only just started to work for them. Such as writing more than just the title for their big research paper. I can certainly sympathize, writer's block can be a real bitch. I'm just lucky that after I finished school, nothing I ever had to write was something that had a deadline of some kind. So it's not that big of a deal if I can't find it in me to write for it for months. But for the professor, writer's block is probably going to be dangerous for himself and his lone assistant if they want to keep getting research grants. And hey, struggling with drafts for a paper is a decent excuse for why we never actually see him do much of anything as a professor in this game. He's too busy trying to justify having an income. Now, if only Oak had that kind of excuse. Seriously. The guy is treated as the absolute example of Pokemon Professor, and he's only there because he showed up first and has a tendency to do the intro for games he's not even part of. It's not that I think he's a bad example of a professor. It's just that he does about as much as Elm, but Elm is essentially forgotten. It just doesn't feel fair to me. No, that's scary from my perspective, but that's because everything looks 2D to me here. It's not like I know how far the drop down is from one ledge to the ground on the other side. I see everything in 2D. The distance might be similar, but somehow the walk from Pallet to Viridian felt more impactful than from New Bark to Cherry Grove. Probably because I don't remember anything about the anime at this point in the series or onwards. I dropped off from watching Ash fumble around sometime during the Orange Islands episodes. I was more into Digimon and Monster Rancher at the time. Funny how those two series had better TV shows back then, but Pokemon seems to have grown a hell of a lot more. Possibly because Monster Rancher and Digimon had iffier video games, but then it's not like the Pokemon games have been carrying them that well these days. Maybe it was because Ash was just a hot-blooded kid who was born in that world and too arrogant to actually study much of anything before hitting the road, whereas the other protagonists in the other series were just thrown into unfamiliar worlds. I don't know. Not a terribly long walk to your house, was it, old man? I'm not really being judgmental about how small the towns and cities are in this old game. It's just an easy thing to make fun of. I'm pretty sure that entire worlds in the Legend of Zelda franchise were less populated than a Pokemon game. It doesn't matter if they were 2D or 3D, there's just not that much room in any game to make it feel 100% lived in. It's always been a bit funny to me that Pokemon is such a peaceful franchise for the most part, but combat is a major part of creatures' life cycle. I mean, sure, that's more of a gameplay mechanic than anything else, but it's been treated as how things work in every form of media. I don't see all that many flowers out here. At best, there are a few painted on the short grass. Certainly not anything that makes me feel like it should be a defining trait for this town. Anyway, looks like this generation also follows the tradition of not letting us capture anything until we gain the Pokedex later on. That was acceptable in the first Pokemon generation because, well, that was our first time going through that sort of journey. But by the second generation, I think they should have just let us start capturing Pokemon from the moment we leave our hometown for the first time. Even if I'm not trying to see how good I am as a trainer, that's the only way we can make progress around here. And that's gonna be the case in all the Pokemon games, even the fan-made ones. It's a bit of a core element to the franchise. I'm sure a lot of old people in this world can say the same. Not bad advice, but it's hard to follow if we're not allowed to have any Pokeballs to capture fresh Pokemon yet. Anyway, that seems to be pretty much everything in Cherry Grove. Time to head north and get the job that Elm sent us to do done. Wonderful. We've got Weedles popping up on our way to the bloody pickup spot. Please tell me we aren't going to have to keep falling back to town due to Pokemon poisoning just because I'm an unlucky bastard. Excuse me for fast-forwarding through all random encounters, even the ones where we capture someone. This is already going to be a very long Let's Play just based on the sheer amount of raw bits of footage for the Crystal playthrough alone. To give you a hint of just how long this is going to be, think about how little detail and sound has been in these videos. That's not a whole lot of pixels there. And then realize that we've got 7.4 gigs worth of footage just for the Crystal part of this run. This is going to be an absolute monster of a Let's Play for me to work on, and I'm most definitely going to be exhausted long before I get to the end of it. Anyway, parries are another additional mechanic that's been thrown in with some other held items capable of powering up your Pokemon to one degree or another. A Caterpie this time. I suppose that's gonna mean this is gonna be the return of Gaban and Mothra for this game. But since our first gym is going to be flying types, that means that a Butterfree and Beedrill will be very bad choices for the first gym. And that would be the best time possible for using two bug types like them. On a certainly note, I appreciated being able to have a Butterfree when facing Brock and Kanto at the start, that's for sure. I probably shouldn't shit-talk the Johto gym leaders before we've even faced the first one. But there is no getting around the fact that I can distinctly remember all 8 of the Kanto leaders. They hit all the right notes, even with the limits on the non-existent story and how few lines they got to speak. But I have never been able to remember all 8 of the gym leaders in any other region. In Johto, I remember Faulkner, Whitney because she's a difficulty spike, Jasmine because she's a bit of a trek to be able to challenge, Bryce because his gym has an odd gimmick, and Claire as the 8th. I remember more than I forget, but it's still odd that I don't even need to think about who's gym leader where in Kanto. But I have to stop and think just to list 5 out of 8 in Johto. And I remember even fewer gym leaders in Hoenn in the 3rd generation. Hell, I probably should have said something during our fight with that Hoppip, assuming you could call that a fight. After all, we never would have seen one of those in Kanto. Well, this guy certainly lives in an out-of-the-way spot, and I'm pretty sure he's got more flowers outside his home than Cherry Grove does. Part of me wants to make a cooking joke, but I'm pretty sure pretty much every playthrough of Johto makes that joke around now. What, they just took the egg from the parents and didn't notify the trainers who might want to raise a baby that hatches from it? I know breeding is one of the new mechanics in this game, but come on, there had to be a smoother way to pull it off than, we found this egg, here, send it to someone who can figure out how eggs work outside of a frying pan. Not that we're gonna see all that many eggs in my playthroughs of Pokemon. I just do not feel comfortable putting Pokemon together and breeding them, since the anime and manga treat them as having some level of sentience. Hell, I didn't feel comfortable in Persona or Fire Emblem when they introduced romance options for the various characters. It's not that I'm squeamish about people getting into relationships and making families and all that. If they form on their own, I'm fine with it, but unfortunately in the context of a video game, we very frequently have a part in making them happen. And with my own dismal romance life, I don't trust myself to help people or Pokemon find a life partner. Well, Professor Oak giving us a Pokedex in this game feels about as forced as the whole eggs are now a thing part. It could have been worse, and considering how old the game is, I think I can forgive it being less than smooth. Still, it feels like something worth calling out. While I appreciate the quick heal, it's not like it's all that far to the nearest Pokemon Center. So you've got some broken computers here, huh? Has the research money just not been coming in for some reason? Maybe you've got some papers to write? Or maybe he's just an avid coin collector. Maybe if he actually spent those coins, then he wouldn't have 2 broken computers in the corner. Well, I can't tell you what you should do if you don't know what's wrong there. We've already got a reason to head back to the lab. Why did we need another motive to do so? Anyway, we've got familiar territory to walk through and a bunch of random encounters on our way back to Cherry Grove. Time for some more fast-forwarding. Granted, it didn't save me all that much time, just turning a 28-minute clip into, around 26, but I'll take what I can get this early on. Again, this is going to be a very long journey, and I'm fairly sure a large chunk of it is going to be me grinding for experience points, or trying to find members of the team that I don't really have set in stone just yet. Wait, I apparently forgot to talk to the people in the Pokemon Center in here. May as well see what they have to say before we finish things off. Okay, they didn't have anything especially amazing to say, but it's new for this playthrough. That counts for something. And that is a very lonely Pokeball on that healing machine there. I'm sure in the next clip, it will have a few more friends next to it.